In Peter Farrelly's film Green Book, Viggo Mortensen eats and smokes his way through the Deep South while being a chauffeur. Is that really what the movie's about? Wait, what? What did I watch? The story is really about an Italian-American bouncer who becomes a chauffeur and bodyguard for an African-American piano virtuoso as he goes on a musical tour of the Deep South in the early 1960s. The movie is based on a true story and stars Viggo Mortensen as Tony Lip, the driver, and Mahershala Ali, who plays Don Shirley, the musical virtuoso. Now, the title of the film, Green Book, I was unaware of where that comes from. And early in the film, we find out as the record executives are giving Mortensen just all of his instructions for driving and where he's supposed to go, and if he misses anything, what the consequences are, all of these things. But they also give him a green book. They tell him, you and Dawn sometimes will be staying at the same hotel and other times you won't. So here is this green book. And now again, I have never even heard of the green book. And then they flash onto the screen the picture, the cover of this green book. And it is for African American people to know where they can stay in hotels while they're traveling, where it is safe for them to stay, or that are just colored only hotels. And as Viggo says to his wife, I don't know, it's for traveling while black. What does that mean? What? Well, if you're traveling and you're black, that's self-explanatory. As he says it, it's comedic and painful all at the exact same time. The story itself is really about change, and it's not just Viggo's character changing, it's also Mahershala's character changing. Both of them together have changed to accomplish in their lives, because Tony is kind of just what you see is what you get. I mean, he's basically poor, paycheck to paycheck. He's lived in the same house he grew up in with now his wife and kids, and it's like a one-bedroom apartment. I mean, it was weird that his kids are in bunk beds and then he gets into bed and it's in the exact same room. He's not educated, or at least not formally educated, and so when he, if one job shuts down or has to take a break, he has to go and find other work, and he has to pawn stuff to just make ends meet. You contrast Tony with Don's character, and Don lives above Carnegie Hall. I mean, he is well off. He has this solid recording contract, and now as he's going on tour, I mean, he just has cash to spare. So you get to see both of them together, and just that polar opposites, not only just in their lifestyle, but also in the way that they speak, the way that they carry each other. I mean, Tony he's rough. He's rough around the edges. Now, he has honor, and he's a good guy at heart, but he's also just, he's abrasive, and he's verbally abusive sometimes, and he cusses a lot, and he smokes, and golly does he eat, and he can eat. And Don is refined, and he's proper, and he's educated and intelligent, and they don't even speak the same way. And so it's really funny to watch them as they learn to communicate and learn to just subsist together in this car as they're going from town to town to town. And it's not all butterflies and rainbows as they go from town to town. As you can imagine, a black man in the early 60s going into this Deep South, there's gonna be trouble. Their performances are so good, and they feel like real friends when they're on screen. And I loved that it didn't take a lot of convincing for me to watch this friendship develop, that I'm just watching it and I'm experiencing it, and it makes sense that as they transition and as they interact, just the circumstances that surround them just lends itself to trust and to growth. And all the while, I'm like, yeah, this feels natural. Now, while this isn't primarily a comedy, there are a lot of comedic elements and comedic scenes in it. And I wish the trailer hadn't have shown so many of these moments, because as they come up, while I laughed, especially in context, I'm like, oh gosh, I already saw this one, and there wasn't a lot of surprises left for the comedy. Now, that being said, with the comedy, the film is directed by Peter Farrelly, and half of the Farrelly brothers, who's brought us, stuff like Dumb and Dumber and There's Something About Mary. So the guy gets comedy, and he uses his comedic timing to push past some sequences and some scenes that could be really sensitive, and he plays them for guilt-free laughter. Like, there is one scene, and it's shown in the trailer, and if you haven't seen the trailer, well, I'm sorry, it's not totally a spoiler. Well, it's not a spoiler at all. But Viggo is eating Kentucky Fried Chicken, and he offers it to Mahershala. And the revulsion of why would I eat this? And then the conversation that goes back and forth of Viggo Mortensen, well, your people eat this. What do you mean my people? Just that whole interaction was wonderfully done. And while it could have been insensitive and rude and racist, and at the heart it kind of was, you get to see them mesh together, and Viggo softening and Mahershala also softening from his proper stance, and they kind of meet in the middle there. The music in this was awesome. I mean, I just loved watching the concerts, and as Mahershala playing Dawn, as he's just playing on the piano, it's so convincing. And I really found myself wondering, does he really know how to play piano? Because it looks like he is playing those keys and he is playing that music. So I did look it up like everybody else does. I Googled it because that's what you do. And no, he didn't. Now, he did sit down with the composer and really learn to play some of the music. Not learn to play, but at least learn the finger movements and learn how to hold his posture and his arms, and just so that it looks convincing. The movie's 2 hours and 10 minutes long, and I don't really think that I felt the time at all. The pacing seemed to go pretty well. There are some slower moments, but I think that that works well within the story. You do have a lot of traveling, and so maybe some of that could be cut down a little bit, but I feel that as they go to each new city and they encounter something new, we need to see that because it is paramount to watching the change that occurs in both of the characters. Now, the ending itself of the film is pretty predictable, but I didn't mind. I mean, I was so enthralled in the performances and the story itself, and I was having such a good time watching it and just learning and watching their growth, that having a predictable ending, especially one that's based on a true story, it didn't bother me at all. So despite it maybe being a little bit long and missing out on a few explanation moments, I really liked Green Book. If you're looking for an uplifting film that has some good comedic moments in there and some stellar performances, I highly recommend Green Book. Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali are definitely, I would hope, really up for some award nominations because both of their performances, while different, are stellar. There's no sex or nudity, there's maybe a tiny bit of violence, and there is quite a bit of profanity. I give Green Book 4.5 out of 5 couches. What is a movie that you could recommend to me that is based on true facts? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share, subscribe, and tap that notification bell so that you know when I upload new content. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.